and Marilyn R. Klein, Chair of Hebrew Bible Old Testament LSTC, and I'm the Chair of the ELCA Consultative Panel on Lutheran Jewish Relations. So I welcome you all here. And we're also welcoming on the screen Rabbi Rick Jacobs, the President of the Union for Reform Judaism, and Presiding Bishop Elizabeth Eaton of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. I think maybe by Rabbi Minkus, this would be great. So we also welcome again Rabbi David Minkus from our neighboring synagogue, and Cantor Rosenberg. Thank you so much, and all of our guests here. So speaking particularly to Rabbi Jacobs and Bishop Eaton, you're coming together to commemorate the 30th anniversary of the 1994 Declaration embodies the close relationship between Reform Judaism and the ELCA. And so we're really appreciative. You know, about 20 years ago, when discussions about the situation in the Middle East became increasingly tense, leadership from the ELCA and from the URJ continued to talk with each other. And again, today, when our country and the world are in ever more polarizing situation, it's good to see both of you. And we know, Rabbi Jacobs, you would have liked to have been with us in person as well. But here you are, still in conversation together. So we start this afternoon with a land acknowledgement. LSTC recognizes that our school stands on the lands of the Potawatomi, Miami, and Peoria peoples. For thousands of years before their forced removal, this was their traditional homeland, and it continues to hold their ancestral stories and wisdom. We honor and thank the elders of these and other nations, past and present. These lands are still home to many indigenous people, and we are grateful to learn in this place. So today, what we're going to do to mark the 30th anniversary of the 1994 Declaration to the Jewish people, we'll explore some of the historical background of the Declaration and trace some of the developments that grew out of it, with a focus on how face-to-face dialogue between Jews and Christians served as a catalyst to move things forward. And after that, then our two national religious leaders, Bishop Eaton and Rabbi Jacobs, will talk about the significance of the 1994 Declaration for their communities and for Jewish-Christian relations today. And then we will open the floor for brief reflections about what the ELCA Declaration means in different contexts for people's lives, work, and communities. And we'll have Rabbi Minkus offer reflections, and we have a couple of other members here. Mark Swanson will say a few words, and also on the screen we have Peg Schultz Ackerman, who will is the ELCA pastor and also on the consultative panel. And then if we have time, we will have question and answers. There's some papers that are going to be on your table, so please write your questions there, and they will be collected by Sarah Trum, Candace Coley, and Catherine Laurie, and they'll be collated and so forth. So we look forward to this whole event unfolding here. Okay, so now I have 15 minutes to talk about the historical and relational background of the ELCA Declaration adopted in 1994. And I may need to edit myself as we go along. But if I don't have a chance to complete all of my remarks, I will say this, that as I was preparing for this, what I realized at a new level, it's not an original insight, but it was a new impact, that it's when Jews and Christians get together and talk about the issues that are on the table. That's when we really are able to make progress in our relationship. And so this is an example of that we are just so delighted to bring members of the two communities together. So the 1994, there's some copies of the Declaration on your table, and I think that there's probably additional copies in the back table if you don't have that. But it makes clear that the commitments of the ELCA and the Lutheran Federation, that they're not separate, but actually they're shared commitments. And the Lutheran Federation, World Federation, was formed after World War II in 1947. So right after that, and then the National Council of Churches was formed around that time in 1948. Also in 1947, although independently of the Lutheran World Federation, there was an emergency conference on anti-Semitism in Seligsburg, Switzerland, that brought together a group of Jews and Christians, once again, that face-to-face dialogue. And they articulated 10 points to address anti-Semitism in the churches. The conference also led to the formation of the International Council of Christians and Jews, which until today remains dedicated to the renewal of Jewish-Christian relations. The Lutheran World Federation later affirmed and sought to uphold these 10 points of Seligsburg within its member churches. So from the very beginning, there was this dialogue which was moving for improved relationships. And that's, as I say, that's my major point today. So in the 1960s, Jewish-Christian dialogue started. This was also the time of Vatican II, leading to significant changes in the Roman Catholics' teachings about Judaism and the Jewish people, expressed in Nostra Aetate, the Declaration on the Religion, the Declaration on the Relation of the Church with Non-Christian Religions. And from the late 1960s, Lutheran churches in the USA were in dialogue with the American Jewish Committee. So once again, that face-to-face dialogue. And the American Jewish Committee represented all branches of Judaism. Their dialogue led to a series of conferences and joint publications and to the repudiation of Christian anti-Semitism. Predecessor Lutheran churches of the ELCA began to issue statements about Jewish-Christian relations. For example, in 1974, after 5 years of dialogue, the American Lutheran Church issued the statement called The American Lutheran Church and the Jewish Community, calling on Christians to appreciate the ties between Judaism and Christianity and to learn about post-biblical rabbinic Judaism. The statement labeled Luther's writings on the Jews as beyond defense and encouraged Lutherans to develop and deepen relationships of respect and cooperation with our Jewish neighbors. Lutheran Jewish engagement that resulted in outcomes such as this American Lutheran Church statement, which was adopted just 5 years after the dialogue began with the American Jewish Committee. This kind of dialogue and these statements began to build the capacity that enabled the ELCA to issue the 1994 Declaration to the Jewish Community so quickly after its formation in 1988. Internationally, in the 1980s, the LWF also engaged in direct dialogue with Jewish partners. To mark the 500th anniversary of Martin Luther's birth in 1983, the LWF and the International Jewish Commission for Interreligious Consultation, it's known as IJKIC, the International Jewish Commission for Interreligious Consultation, held a special consultation in Sweden, resulting in a historic joint statement on Lutheranism, and the Jews, as well as separate statements in which Jews and Christians addressed each other directly, reflecting on Jewish-Christian relations from their distinct perspectives. This consultation informed the Lutheran World Federation General Assembly the next year in Budapest. And from what I understand, Bishop Eaton was there in Budapest in 1984 when that statement was adopted. So maybe she will tell us something about her experience there. Then in 1988, just 4 years later, the ELCA was formed. And in the very next year, in 1989, a consultative panel on Lutheran-Jewish relations was created, led by Dr. Franklin Sherman. Dr. Sherman was a former professor here of ethics and church and society at LSTC. He was also the dean here before he became the first director of the Institute for Jewish Christian Understanding at Muhlenberg College, one of the church-related liberal arts colleges of the ELCA. LSTC is very proud of its leadership in Jewish-Christian relations, and this whole history shows how the colleges, seminaries, faculties, the institutes, and the national church and the LWF, how they all support each other and work together. So 3 years later, 1991, the Second Churchwide Assembly of the ELCA adopted a Declaration of Ecumenical Commitment, a policy statement of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. So we focus first on how the ELC would relate to other Christian church bodies. And this declaration, though, of ecumenical commitment included a call for a separate official statement to describe the ELCA's commitments and aspirations in the area of interreligious relations. And that call was recently fulfilled in 2019. So it took a while, but we came to a full circle there. Then in 1993, the ELCA Churchwide Assembly called for a statement rejecting Luther's anti-Jewish rhetoric. This measure was passed after examples of Luther's words were read verbatim on the floor. Passages from Luther's late treatise from 1543 on the Jews and their lies were read, and the members were shocked. And so it passed. Most Lutherans really don't know much about Luther's virulent anti-Jewish diatribes and his violent recommendations, but it only needed to be heard to for the assembly to know that they had to take action. Meanwhile, Jews have long remembered, and there's a quote, I need to track down the source, but it goes to the effect, Jews have memorized the blood-stained pages that Christians have torn out of their history books. So the next year is 1994, and we have the Declaration of the ELCA to the Jewish people adopted by the Church Council. It's especially powerful because this was not a statement about Jews or Judaism, but rather an address to the Jewish people directly, recognizing our shameful past and repudiating Luther's anti-Jewish words, repenting of their tragic effects in history, especially in connection with the Shoah, and committing to changed behavior so that we can actually live out our faith in Jesus Christ with love and respect for the Jewish people. This statement is a living document, and it was revised and once again adopted by the Church Council in 2021. In the decades since 1994, much changed in the world, unfortunately making the declaration even more relevant than ever before. And so this reaffirmation had several updates. One was addressing directly a more new dangerous era for Jews in the United States and across the globe by adding the phrase incitement to violence in this sentence in the document. In concert with the Lutheran World Federation, we particularly deplore the appropriation in our day of Luther's words by modern anti-Semites for the teaching of hatred and incitement to violence toward Judaism and the Jewish people. Incitement to violence had to be added as a response to the alarming rise in physical violence against Jews, even in the United States, which had previously been largely free of such horrors. Example would be the mass shooting in the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 2018 that killed 11 people and injured 6 others. And in Chicago, we see this happening in recent days, with the assault on the man in West Rogers Park, Jewish man who was attacked on the way to synagogue, and the 2 Jewish DePaul students walking on DePaul's campus who were assaulted. So we pray for an end to these hate crimes against Jews during this period of heightened polarization in our country, which also threatens Muslims, persons with ambiguous immigration status, and other vulnerable groups. We pray and we work to make these things stop. So the reception by the Jewish community to this document has been generally very positive, with appreciation for its honesty and its directness, as well as for the clear commitments that it expresses. And it was actually this document that led me to deeper involvement in Lutheran Jewish relations. I attended a workshop led by Frank Sherman, where he went through the statement, and I just welcomed the bracing clarity of the repudiation of Martin Luther's invectives and hate-filled directives. And I appreciate the warm language directed toward the Jewish community, expressing our urgent desire to live out our faith in Jesus Christ with love and respect for the Jewish people. Now, I created a list of all of the documents and so forth related to Lutheran Jewish relations that have been an outpouring of this declaration. Much of the work of the EALC Consultative Panel on Lutheran Jewish Relations since 1994 has been to create resources that flesh out what the declaration means, to live out our faith in Jesus Christ with love and respect for the Jewish people. There's a list that you can read with annotations. So if you don't have time to read the whole document, and all of them can be found on the ELCA website under Ecumenical and Interreligious Relations, or you can Google them by title. There's many in the back as well that you can pick up and take home with you. I want to especially highlight one of the more recent, which is it's a guidebook for pastors and teachers from 2022, Preaching and Teaching with Love and Respect for the Jewish People. And so it's for those who lead classes and preach, and it helps teachers and preachers identify what's sometimes unconscious anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish patterns of reading the Bible or teaching, and suggests alternative ways of doing that. So we are kind of living into a new way of thinking about our Christian faith in relationship to the Jewish people. So this helps a great deal. And the ELCA's declaration in 1994 to the Jewish people also served as a foundation and incentive for other ELCA interreligious efforts. So we had in 2008, the ELCA Muslim Lutheran Consultation Panel was formed. Professor Mark Swanson from LSTC is the chair. And then, as I mentioned in 2019, the ELCA's interreligious policy statement was adopted, widening the scope beyond Jewish-Christian relations to other interreligious relations and fulfilling that call from 1991. And then in 1022, that was a long time ago, 2022, just, is anybody listening? My children say my voice puts them to sleep, but in 2022, the ELCA adopted a declaration of the ELCA to the Muslim community, prepared by the Consultative Panel on Lutheran Muslim Relations. It's a different relationship with a different history, so there are distinctive emphases to this declaration, but like the 1994 declaration, it's directed to the Muslim community, and it expresses both our repentance for things that are wrong in our past, and also our love, respect, and commitment as a Lutheran church to partner for common good. And we pledge to get to know the Muslim community better and acknowledge that we may come to know God more deeply through dialogue with our Muslim neighbors. So all of these are available again at the ELCA website under Ecumenical and Interreligious Relations. Now, on the bottom, very bottom of that list, that annotated list of resources, I tacked on a Lutheran World Federation document. So that one doesn't really belong, but I did want to put it there because that'll return us to the Lutheran World Federation at the end of my remarks. And that resource is a study document called Hope for the Future, a study document for renewing Jewish-Christian relations. And you can also get that for download at the Lutheran World Federation website. It was prepared in advance of the 13th Assembly of the Lutheran World Federation in Krakow, Poland in September of 2023. Some of the students here were able to go to that assembly and see what a vibrant gathering of 6,000 people it was. I was the chair of the study team, comprised of 7 representatives, one from each of the 7 regions of the Lutheran World Federation. We also had our Lutheran World Federation staff support, Steven Kitt from the Department of Theology, Mission and Justice, and an intern, Rivka Shunk, that moved us along. And we met over the course of 2 years. So it was a long process and we really got to know each other. We mostly met online. This was during COVID times and we were at great distance, but we had 2 week-long in-person meetings, very memorable, one in Amman, Jordan, because they were accepting tourists. So we were able to meet. That was in the spring of 2021. And another was in Krakow in the fall of 2022. It was a fascinating process since people from countries with very different histories of Jewish-Christian relations came together, including the US, Poland, Norway, Palestine, Argentina, Ethiopia, Germany, Netherlands, and Malaysia. If you can imagine, the experience was quite different, and we paired up and we wrote on topics where we had some expertise, and then we traded and we reorganized and went through content editing. I worked closely with a content editor. We didn't have any Jewish members on the study task force itself, but we interacted with representatives from the International Jewish Committee on Interreligious Consultations. And they carefully reviewed and offered comments on 2 different drafts of the document, which greatly improved the result. So Hope for the Future was well received. There were 2 workshops on it at the 13th Assembly, which happened to fall on the Jewish New Year. The 6,000 participants went to Auschwitz, Birkenau during the assembly to witness the horrors of the Shoah and to renew our commitment to right relations between Jews and Lutherans. And the following day, after our trip, we heard from a 97-year-old Polish historian and journalist and survivor of Auschwitz, Marian Turksi. He spoke before the assembly, and he asked important questions for our time. Why do I keep seeing anti-Semitism, racism, xenophobia, and the violation of human rights? Why is there still fear, prejudice, stereotyping, and dehumanization of people in different parts of the globe? Those are good questions. So in concluding, I just want to emphasize that this project, Hope for the Future, renewed the relationship between IJKIC, the International Jewish Committee on Interreligious Consultation, and the LWF that had started already in the 1980s. After the LWF assembly, there was a follow-up meeting of representatives from those 2 organizations, but the dialogue was truncated by events starting on October 7th and continuing to this day. So we trust and hope that in time, this dialogue and all dialogues locally and nationally and internationally will resume within whatever new contexts emerge. Stands as a record of the LWF's hope and commitment to work for God's shalom. To work for God's shalom, for Jewish-Christian relations, and for the flourishing of all human communities. So now we ask Bishop Eaton to speak to the importance of the declaration for the church.
Thank you, Dr. Men. Obviously, this at least annual renewal or observance of Kristallnacht is something that can't stop. It's not we can check this off and we've satisfied all of the horrors. And in one way, they're not over yet. So I was always I don't know, puzzled or bemused about the title Kristallnacht, which makes it sound so lovely, when actually it wasn't lovely. So, and we see this still continuing in our country and around the world. So thank you to LSTC for hosting us again. for this very important observance. And just to remind us all that President Neiman, who helped us put this together, is concluding his tenure as president at the end of January after 13 years of serving as president. So thank you for your leadership. Thank you to Sarah Trum and Professor Esther Ben for organizing with us, and students, I think, were involved also in the preparation and the design of not only the bulletin cover, but some of the service. Thanks to Esther for her leadership as chair of the ELCA Consultative Panel on Lutheran Jewish Relations, and its members for their longstanding work in advising the church and developing resources in support of Lutheran Jewish relations. And I think someone held up it back there. We're trying, but our website's a little difficult to navigate. So if you go there, not only that, the list of all the resources that we have, I hope you'll make yourself take advantage of that. Also, thanks to Rabbi Rick Jacobs, who's I'm the Rick Jacobs of the ELCA. So he's in New York City. And I can't remember, Rick, are you a Yankees fan?
I thought this was a nonpartisan gathering. I didn't want to enter into that, but I do
Well, you
root
can
for.
see how big a tent this is because I'm a Cleveland Guardians fan. And
Oh my
if
goodness!
we
And
can,
look at
that's
it,
the biggest divide between.
and we're friends nonetheless. How about that?
Thank you for your participation, and also a longstanding partnership that we've had in dialogue and advocacy, working together on many things. So I want to talk about a declaration and why. What does it really mean? Why does it even matter? So we have a 30th anniversary today, which we're recognizing, and we understand that there, as we heard in the observance, that there are commitments that we've made to this. So in a declaration, we say that this is a relational document. It's not, I shouldn't say merely academic because I don't want to disparage academics in the room, but it's a relational document, as Dr. Men has really emphasized through this. We confess our sins to God, and on that foundation, we express our contrition for those from whom we've been divided, harmed with our words and deeds, both within the church and beyond. And then we indicate our desire for right relationship and what we intend to do with the help of the Holy Spirit. So a declaration is a commitment made to God, our neighbors, and ourselves. And you heard the list that Dr. Men recited, the Declaration of Ecumenical Commitment, which at the very end of its, I think the last paragraph, leaves the way for the sequel. And so years later, we worked on the Declaration of Interreligious Commitment, a declaration of the ELCA to the Jewish community in 1991. The Joint Declaration on the Doctrine of Justification. This is with the Roman Catholic Church between the Vatican and the LWF. We've also developed a declaration of the ELCA to people of African descent. And we have a declaration of interreligious commitment, as we've heard, declaration of the ELCA to American Indian and Alaska Native people in 2021, and a declaration of the ELCA to the Muslim community. You've heard all about these. But these declarations, based on not only the ecumenical declaration, but the declaration of the ELCA to the Jewish people, that was the basis, the foundation for us to say, there's a lot of things that have been done in the name of God, and particularly in the Lutheran movement, for which we must take responsibility, and not just take responsibility, but then move forward in action. So that really got us started, I would say. We know that a declaration of any kind is really an aspirational sort of statement, and it requires constant and continual effort and practice. And this failure to live up to our commitments is something that happens when we really don't take this seriously and say, this is, as we've heard, a living document that is something that must be revisited every day. So the commitments we've made to in these various declarations sometimes interact. Dr. Men mentioned the revisions made to the declaration in 2021. That was in part not just because of the rise in anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic violence in this country, but also we had adopted a repudiation of the doctrine of discovery, which is repudiating something that happened in the, give me the century, 1600s. and where the Pope issued a bull that said people, any lands that are unoccupied may be claimed on behalf of the Pope by divided up between the Spanish and the French in some ways. And that meant anybody who's any land that the people were not Christian, they were not people. So those lands were just, they were vacant. And so we repudiated that. And then when we take a look also at the sorry history in our country of the genocide and the continuing attempt to obliterate the voices, the history, the heritage, even the spiritual life of indigenous people, yeah, we had to add that in there that certainly the Shoah was horrible, but that's not the only horrible thing we've done. So you could take a look at that. So we did that back then. Oops, sorry, wrong page. Yeah, so now it reads, in the long history of the church, the treatment accorded to the Jewish people by Christians has been among our most grievous and shameful legacies. All right. So are you next or no, I still me? I just, like, as a side note, I was in Budapest in 1984 as a very young pastor. I think I filled very, very many quotas that needed to be checked off. I was female, I was really young, I was new, but we did, I think, in a really powerful way, but I think not really recognized and lived into by Lutherans, particularly, I would say, can speak about this context, where we said that the covenant that God established with Israel is not, it's not superseded at all. And that we said also that we will adopt a policy of non-proselytization. And that was, I think you could have a chance to read about that. I think that helped to set in motion the work that we did subsequently. But while we were there in Budapest, which was still then on the Iron Curtain side of things, we were supposed to have a ceremony to commemorate Raoul Wallenberg, who had helped with the rescue or the escape of Jewish people in Budapest. And there's a plaque for him on a corner. And when the Hungarian officials found out we were going to have this actual, I don't know, not celebration, but observance, they said, you can't do that. So we had to scrap our plans for some great thing, but we all went there, not all, many of us went there anyways, and we did hold on to that, remembering that at least one Lutheran was able to stand up. We don't know what happened to Raoul Wallenberg. He disappeared and perhaps into the Soviet gulag, who knows? He's obviously not here with us anymore. So that was, for me, I was very young and very new. I'd only been ordained for 3 years. That was really a very important experience for me. At that same assembly, we declared status confessionis, this is a technical Lutheran term, against the white South African churches, and said that it's a reason, it's a matter of confessional integrity, that if all Lutheran churches do not see all other Lutheran churches as part of the same family, and in fact, as beloved children of God, which was not happening in South Africa during apartheid, that they could not be a part of the Lutheran World Federation. So those two things together, again, this sort of intersectional thing that we're living with, and even today. So I think that's less than 10 minutes, as my sermons often are. So I think it's Rabbi Jacob's turn?
Mhm.
Okay.
Welcome, Rabbi Jacobs, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's really a joy to be with you. As was said earlier, I wish I could be there in person. It's kind of hard to give these remarks staring at a blank screen in the room, but I know that there are many thoughtful people, a few of whom I know. I think I saw Rabbi Yechiel Pupko enter just before we started, and of course my colleague who will offer a response. I have to begin by expressing words of profound gratitude to my colleague and friend in faith, Bishop Elizabeth Eaton. I'd like to say that I am the Elizabeth Eaton of the Reform movement. Though you did say it the other way, I think it has to be mutual if this is going to have any real, kind of power to transform. And since I reached out to the bishop a few years back, she has been open-hearted, thoughtful, and very responsive to the experiences and traumas of our Jewish community. And I have to also commend the remarkable Catherine Laurie for her important role in strengthening the bonds that hold our denominations together. In fact, if I could, I would just say that if Moses, in the 5 books of Moses, had had a Catherine Laurie, I think the wandering in the desert would have been no more than 30 years. It would not have taken the full 40. On that, I'm fairly confident. But he was, he had his brother and a few others to help along the way. So really so much talent and wisdom in this leadership of the church. So Bishop Eaton's kindness isn't only a personal kindness, it's also theological, as all of you know. And it's informed by her deep commitment to live the most noble teachings of the Christian faith. This year, on the eve of Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the Jewish calendar, I shared a letter she sent me. Really, it's a pastoral care letter. I shared it with the entirety of the Reform movement because it expresses such a deep solidarity to the vulnerability, the loss, and the strife that we feel in North America, but also in Israel. And I wanted people to know that in this time when a good number of our Christian allies have, in a sense, ghosted us in the aftermath of October 7th, Bishop Eaton and the ELCA, they have not. They have been stalwart and really exemplifying the best of our faith commitments. Let me say a word, if I could, about the declaration of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America to the Jewish community. It's, of course, this document that we've reflected on so far, and it's a document that's worth lauding. It is extraordinary. It establishes a bedrock of understanding and love for the centuries when it was entirely missing this relationship of care and of mutuality and of honesty and safety between the Lutheran Church and the Jewish community. I cannot use enough words to express what this has meant to our Jewish community. Really something quite remarkable. This document overflows with truth-telling about the uniquely harsh and deadly anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism of Martin Luther, especially in light of the Holocaust. And today's powerful ritual of remembrance of Kristallnacht just added such a weight to our discussion this afternoon. And the declaration also sets forth an entirely new way for us to be. We don't have to repeat our history. We can, in fact, be in deep, respectful, and loving relationship, which is, I believe, a description of where our two denominations are. The declaration addresses the deep anti-Semitism within the church, but here I wanted to stretch us a little bit. It does not address directly the way some contemporary expressions of anti-Zionism are also anti-Semitic. The declaration does not enter into this minefield, which is the painful moment we are navigating presently. I'm not suggesting that all criticism of the policies of the state of Israel are anti-Semitic, far from it, but some are. And the distinction is critical if we're to continue to move forward together, as I pray and am confident we will. So let me offer a few reflections on this current moment that our Jewish community is experiencing. And we're experiencing it across the full gamut. So I have my conservative colleague on the panel. It is the Orthodox, the conservative, the Reformed, the Reconstructing Judaism, cultural Jews. This is a moment all of us are experiencing in a very painful way. Let me just underscore the incredible growth and increase in anti-Semitism in North America in particular, though we did see in Amsterdam on the eve of Kristallnacht a full-scale pogrom against a group of Israeli soccer fans who had come to Amsterdam to root for their team. But the Jewish Federations of North America issued a survey recently, and they found that 1 in 4 North American Jews have personally experienced anti-Semitism in the last few years. That doesn't mean they read a story about it. It doesn't mean that their friend at work told them about it. It means they themselves experienced an anti-Semitic encounter either in person or online. And you have to admit, 1 out of 4, that's a stunning reality. But that reality isn't caused by just one factor. There are many different factors. And I also want to point out, it's really essential to note that this uptick in anti-Semitism predates October 7th. The graph measuring the rise of anti-Jewish hate shows a steady uptick over the last decade. So this reality means that our synagogues and all Jewish institutions need intense security protocols in order to keep our people safe while learning or worshiping or celebrating. When we go to synagogue on Shabbat or a holiday, or just for a Torah class or a lecture on Jewish history, we go through security guards. We often go through magnometers. Those are just standard for any Jewish gathering. And when we wear a Jewish star, or as I do and my colleague does, we wear a yarmulke, a kippah on our heads, just walking down the street with an identifiable Jewish symbol can invite taunts or even physical attacks. That is the moment we're in. And just to point out what I know we've all been very aware of, days after that Hamas mass murder of 1,200 people on October 7th, our whole Jewish world was simply without a mooring. We were just so deeply grieved and trying to sort and find our way. I went just a few days after the war started to Israel, and I went because I had many friends who had been murdered on October 7th. And I'll just mention one of my close friends, Ophir Lipstein, who was the mayor of a group of cities, communities right along the Gaza border. And he was one of the very first people to die on October 7th. Why? Because he woke up and he saw what was happening. He saw this flood of Hamas terrorists coming into his kibbutz, Kfar Aza, and he ran to see what he could do to defend all the people who maybe were still asleep in the kibbutz. And his son, Nitzan, also lived on the kibbutz. And we prayed, imagine this, we prayed that he was taken as a hostage, along with the 250 others who were taken hostage on that day. Can you imagine praying that someone was a hostage? But it turned out our prayers were not to be, and he was found. He also had been murdered on the same day as his father in the same kibbutz. It just kind of overwhelmed me. And I walked into their house, and Ophir's widow, Vered, was sitting Shiva for her husband and her son. And I felt like I walked into Job's home. The words of comfort just were not anywhere near any of our mouths. But let me just say a sentence about who Ophir was. He wasn't just my friend. He was a visionary. He had created an unbelievably inspiring project for Gazans and Israelis along the border to share economic growth. It was a way to build coexistence, and it was about to be formally launched. And he, like many of the people in Kfar Aza and Nachal Oz and Nir Am, the communities right along the Gaza, these are some of the most progressive, forward-thinking, peace-committed people that you could find anywhere in the world, and truly remarkable in the Middle East. And yet they were the ones who very much died in that first horrific day. Let me say that today is day 402 since the 100 remaining hostages have endured captivity in Gaza. Many, if not most, are probably already died. The women who are still in captivity have endured sexual violence and abuse. And I spent much of yesterday in Washington, D.C., meeting with the desperate hostage families that have come into D.C. to meet with the leaders of the Jewish Federations of North America, and then they'll be meeting once again with members from the U.S. administration. Let me say that, I so was moved by Rachel Goldberg Poland, who really became the spokesperson for the hostage families. Her son Hirsch was held alive in Gaza till 60 days ago, when he was killed along with 5 others. And she would always speak so eloquently, not only about her son Hirsch, and not only about all of the hostages, she never spoke without mentioning all of the innocents in Gaza. That was part of her moral responsibility. It's part of each of ours. And so I don't want to be, in any way seen to only care about some of God's children. God's children are all of our responsibility. And there's simply no doubt that the suffering that we have witnessed by the Gazan civilians who were caught in the crossfire, really, in many ways, the victims of Hamas's horrific policy of using innocent people as human shields. And Israel has conducted a war. Wars are horrible things. And they didn't have a choice, I don't believe. After October 7th, you couldn't just hope for peace. You couldn't just sing a song of peace. People needed to feel that they were safe in their homes. With the number of rockets that have been, sent into Israel, they are in the thousands and now in the tens of thousands. So that war, though painful, even excruciating, was inevitable. It wasn't just to keep the Jewish people safe. 20% of the Israelis that hold citizenship in Israel are Muslim, Christian, and Druze. And the devastation in Gaza, it should tear the heart of any person of faith. I can't imagine faith that doesn't feel this horrific suffering. I want to say that our Reform movement, we're the largest Jewish denomination in North America. That's not a boast, it's just a demographic reality. And there are 2 million people who identify with the Judaism that we love and lead. And our movement has especially felt the pain of Palestinian innocents caught in this war. And it is really, really important for us to stand up for our people and have solidarity with the Jewish Israelis, but our solidarity cannot end there. In fact, back in October, when it wasn't really even a thing of discussion, our movement advocated for a humanitarian pause. Why? Because there simply had to be a way to bring food and water and medical supplies to the innocent Gazans who were already suffering mightily from this war between Israel and Hamas. And let me just say a sentence. We have not been quiet over the last 50 years regarding the prospects for peace or some of the injustices that Palestinians have experienced. Our movement has been loud and consistent in condemning the proliferation of West Bank settlements, Jewish settlements that now dot much of the landscape. We've advocated vigorously for a 2-state solution that would end the occupation of the West Bank and grant dignity and full rights to all Palestinians. And yes, we've been outspoken against the violent attacks of West Bank Jewish settlers on Palestinians during this past year. That is not an act of disloyalty to me. That's an act of religious responsibility, and to do so from a place of love. I mean, criticism can come from many places. And some of the criticism that Israel's receiving is not about a policy, but the very existence of the state of Israel. It's the largest Jewish community on planet Earth. 7 million Jews live in Israel. So to say Israel doesn't have a right to exist, which I don't think we say very much about any other country. I've not heard it said about North Korea, Iran, you name the country that has taken advantage of human rights, but somehow Israel is held to a standard that's simply not a standard used for any other nation state. So let me just say that as I kind of wind down, I want to just share something very personal, and that is Bishop Yunab Yunan, who has been previously the Lutheran bishop for Jordan and the Holy Land. He's a dear colleague and a friend. I've known him for over 25 years. Bishop Yunan has taught in my congregation when I served a congregation just outside of New York City. And every single group that I've ever brought to Israel, and I brought many, we've always gone to the Church of the Redeemer, that beautiful church in the old city. You can always find it because it's got that beautiful tower. You can't find a lot of things in the old city, but you can always find the Church of the Redeemer. And he would meet with us always and give a honest and a loving, but sometimes a prophetically challenging assessment of where things were. And with this, I'm really going to bring my remarks to a close. One of our meetings took place during a time when there were just a litany of really horrific terrorist attacks in Jerusalem. And as we finished our meeting, we of course had to have several cups of that wonderful Middle Eastern coffee. He said, how are you going to get home? Because I lived, miles away in the German colony. I said, well, I think I'll hop on a public bus. And he looked at me. He said, you can't do that. It's not safe. He said, I'm going to drive you home. This is one of those moments. Friends don't let friends take the public buses. And I was just very touched. It was very natural to Bishop Yunnan. It wasn't in any way special. That's what he would do for someone in his family, someone that he had that kind of care for. So my last words are, I pray that the transformational declaration of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America to the Jewish community can be extended. That's not a lack of gratitude. I have enormous gratitude for what it is. But I think in this precarious moment in Israel and Palestine, and even throughout North America, and yes, Amsterdam and other places around the world, feels like we need some additional clarity for our relationship and to help give some guidance as everyone tries to navigate. It seems clear to me that the foundation for this declaration has been established, and it is rock solid, and it is so powerful, and we can build on it. But I fear that without confronting the reality facing the blood-soaked lands of the Middle East, that we will not be able to continue just with the frameworks that we currently have. The future of Israel-Palestine must make possible the sharing of that land with safety and dignity for all. Let us work together to bring this war to an end as we bring the hostages home, as we get adequate humanitarian supplies to the people of Gaza, and find ever new ways to spread over all God's children living from the river to the sea a sukkah of shalom, a protective canopy of peace. Amen.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Jacobs. That was really powerful. We're going to just ask a few people just to have just go to the questions, but well, maybe we could, no, just a few words, please, Rabbi. I mean, just if you, yeah, okay. It's hard to. Follow, but- Good. Excellent. Okay, very good. Yeah, please. Oh, thank you.
Tough acts to follow. I'm not even the Rabbi Jacobs or Pastor Eaton of my own home. So, thank you. I'll say it's pretty weird to be here. It feels weird to be talked about and needed to be in the room, but a lot of it happens without Jews in the room. And I'm honored to be here, and I'm happy that this is happening. I will echo a lot of what Rick said. Yeah, I was thinking a lot about what to say here. I said a piece of it earlier, that in Judaism, memory is not a passive act, and memory is to carry the divine, because that requires action. It requires a response to something, rectifying a wrong. And I was also thinking about what it was like to be white in 2020 after the murder of George Floyd, when there was a real racial reckoning happening. And as white people, we were told or intuited, shut up. Now is not your time to talk. Now is your time to listen. And I was thinking, what is my role here as a Jewish person? I took a class on Martin Luther in rabbinical school and was like, whoa, that is tough. And to live, as I said before, for those who were there we were talking about, what do you call that, a service? It felt very Jewish, actually, in that it was very legal. In the call and response, that's how you enact a wedding in Judaism. It's actually a legal observance. It's less romantic. I mean, we kind of throws some of the romanticism into the service, but it's really this legal acquisition of two partners. And so that spoke to me. But how do we as Jews respond and benefit and grow from the work that you have done? And I'll say, this is great. You have the rabbi of a synagogue here, have two prominent rabbis here. You have a wonderful cantor and another prominent rabbi on Zoom, but it would be wonderful if we got more ordinary Jews in the room and we were doing this together. So I thank you for beginning this process that has gone on many years, and I hope that we can be here to see meaningful action moving forward.
Thank you, Rabbi Minkus. You added a lot to the conversation. I wonder if Pastor Peg Schultz-Ackerson could say a few words, just a couple of sentences either. She's an ELCA pastor and has served on the consultative panel. I think you might be muted. Oh, we still can't hear you. Can you hear us? Okay, sorry, we can't hear you. Maybe.
Pastor Peg, if you can please unmute.
Maybe while she's working on that, Mark, do you want to come up and say a couple of words?
Okay. The host is not allowing.
We can hear you now.
Oh, great. Good. Wonderful. Thank you so much. What an honor to be with you all. And Rabbi Jacob's here online with me. I'm so moved by your sharing. And I want to share that I just retired from my congregation, which is right by UCLA in Los Angeles. Retired November 1, but I have stayed in the congregation the last 2 Sundays as supply pastor as they await the interim. And this unique setting is what I think you've talked about, holding all of this together, the beloved children of God, as we have 3 couples in our congregation that are interreligious couples, and the partners come alongside their the non-Jewish come with the Jewish. David is married to Sarah, who is Jewish. Mark is a fiance with Michelle, and Michelle is Jewish. Karen is married to Ben, who is Jewish. And I am so honored every time they come, either online or present with us, our Jewish friends, and they participate with the High Holy Days. But the presence together, praying, we have a candlelight area, as you've talked about, candlelighting being an active, drawing forth the kind of action that we do. We light candles together every Sunday, not just on special occasions. It's available after we have communion, but people can come up at any time. We also have 2 members who are Lebanese and one who is from born and raised in Jerusalem, Palestinian. And what I've been trying to do with them is invite them to help shape the prayers that we offer as the prayers of God's people, which is a part of our liturgy following the sermon and a hymn of the day. And that it's been very important to me hearing how they would like our community to pray in relationship with all that's going on in the world, with the anti-Semitism we see, with the struggles in Gaza and the pain and the suffering going on all across the ways. I'm wearing today, I don't know if you can see it on there, but this, it says peace on here. This was given to me by Rabbi Julie Danan. She's a Reconstructionist rabbi that I've been connected with for a number of years, and walking together through the October 7 and the trauma of her community and her sharing that with me. And prayer is a central way we've been working on it. Back when we celebrated the 25th anniversary of the Declaration, we wrote a litany. I was able to provide some leadership for the litany, and it included a response. O maker and keeper of us all, reform our faith and our living to reflect more boldly first your mercy, your truth, your love, your peace, your grace. And it includes empower us to stand in solidarity with each other to oppose the deadly working of every kind of bigotry, both within our own circles and in society. And I just personally want to tell you one little thing about our own circles. So I've been retired for 2 weeks officially. I'm still, I was still in the pulpit yesterday. Coming out of the pulpit, I preached on Mark 12, which was appointed for for All Saints Sunday. But if you used All Saints Sunday, you had different texts. So it would have been the regular text, which is the Shema, Jesus sharing, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And after the worship service, one of our newer members, not background in the Lutheran Church, but came up and said, all we need to teach people is the difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And I thought, oh my gosh, our work is never done. That is still a sense that, the Old Testament, that is not about the love of the New Testament. And that could be said by a very educated people right in front of me on yesterday, as soon as yesterday. That kind of difficulty, so I just had to tell her right then, well, Jesus is quoting, Deuteronomy and Leviticus, and it's right there. And so the work is before us, it doesn't end. And I am so grateful for the work that we have with this resource, teaching and preaching with love and respect for the Jewish people. We need to keep alive. How do we preach? How do we teach? How do we read the Bible together? And to do that with Jewish partners as well. And in solidarity as well with what's going on in Gaza and with our Palestinian friends as well. So that's what I've been thinking about. I have up on the wall here a woven piece. We did give one to the presiding bishop, and I know there's one in the Synod East, the ELC offices somewhere, but a rabbi and I tore this apart. It's 2 paintings. You rip them apart, the canvas, and then you weave it together into this tree of life. And when Rabbi Julie and I wove it together, it was unforgettable to me doing that with her. We sent one of these to the Tree of Life Synagogue, and they wrote back a beautiful thank you, right after the tragedies there. So I just want to say the Tree of Life is an image for all of us, and to keep living into that. So thank you for the privilege of sharing with each of you. And what I just feel now as a freshly retired, I served for 44 years in various places, freshly retired, our work is not done. Our work is before us. Thank you for hosting this today.
Thank you, Pastor Peg. We're already past time, but Mark, do you want to say a few words? Very few.
Thank you. There's very little to add to these very eloquent remarks and the very thorough historical background that Dr. Men has given us. I'll just say this, that I've often said to students and colleagues that the 1994 declaration of the ELCA to the Jewish community is one of the best things the ELCA has ever done. It's not only that this declaration stands as a foundation stone of the interreligious engagement of the ELCA, which until that point had largely looked at interreligious engagement of the church through the lenses of missionary activity, with some exceptions, but there are kinds of specialized exceptions over here. For the most part, if we thought about interreligious engagement, that was something that the mission department did. But more than that, the declaration pushed the ELCA to some painfully honest self-reflection. If we were going to be linked by, I quote, name and heritage to the memory of Martin Luther, teacher and reformer, end of quote, we were going to have to work out precisely in what way that was possible or not. Now, there may be good reasons for saying let's drop the Lutheran from our denomination's title, or let me stop defining myself as a Lutheran. So we are going to have to work out precisely in what way that was possible, and then acknowledge, as the declaration puts it, the complicity of our own tradition within a history of hatred, which includes Luther's own speech and writings. In carefully, and I have to believe prayerfully, written paragraphs in which not a word is wasted. By the way, I notice how all the documents get longer and longer and longer. The declaration to the Jewish community is 1 page. Not a word is wasted, but the declaration wrestled with just such issues, providing the hope and the possibility of a way forward. The declaration of the ELCA to the Jewish community has served as a monument. I can almost imagine a kind of engraved marble stela in the background of the ELCA's interreligious work that a quarter of a century later resulted in the 2019 policy statement, a declaration of our interreligious commitment. That's the statement that had been promised in 1991. We produced it in 2019. And also the 2022 declaration of the ELCA to the Muslim community. The 1994 statement had shown us the way. Painful honesty with respect to the Lutheran heritage. The careful use and exposition of that which we found precious within that heritage. Repentance for much in the past, and promises of solidarity and accountability for the future. These are living documents indeed, and I hope we can live into them.
Thank you so much. Yes. Let's continue living into them. We are 10 minutes over our time, and if you are like me, I'm disappointed that our question time is over. I don't know the schedule of the presiding bishop and others. I'm happy to stay around and talk in a more informal way, but I just want to thank everyone for coming and for the insights and the different perspectives that we gained today. And let's commit to each other to continue in this work. Thank you.
Yes, we'll have to figure that out.